what was that?
Excellent. Thank you so much for establishing that kind of background.
So that's basically.
All right, thank you. Can you share with us a little bit about your first exposure to what I call HPT, human performance technology, or evidence-based practices for performance improvement, or however you refer to it? And let's start with, how do you refer to this? And when were you first exposed?
Well, I think that there are a lot of different disciplines. I'm on the side of keeping the disciplines independent and using them accordingly. So I try always to represent or integrate what I call a multidisciplinary approach rather than purely interdisciplinary approach. Because I'm a practitioner, I was going to say that it sounds that I have a very academic background, but back in '82, when I got my PhD, I swore to myself I would never go back, which of course I failed to accomplish because Roger Kaufman brought me back to do some kind of academic work. But I worked all my life as a consultant. I started business. I started 4 companies, 2 in Argentina, 2 in the United States, and 1 in Spain. And I'm in boards, etc. So when I think about the field, I think the basic, the larger field of what we call is value creation. Is how to make things that create value for people, for society, for yourself. From then on in, not on, you get the societal performance, then you get the organizational performance, and then the individual performance. Usually, you start the other way. You start by working in some field. For example, myself, I started in simultaneously education, instructional systems design, and process improvement. We would call it time and motion studies. And I have a side work on management, working with supervisors and middle managers back then in the 70s. So all those things evolved. Eventually, I moved up in my career and I became partner at Arthur Andersen. I work with other people, and my customers, my clients were usually CEOs or top managers. So their problems became my problems, and then I started looking at the organization and move a little to the 90s. And in the 90s, most of my customers in management consulting were CEOs, and they started talking about what was going on around the company. And that's when I started working in societal performance. Actually, I brought in 1995 Roger Kaufman to Argentina, and we work in organizing or helping 4 towns where an oil company that was my primary client was failing to keep people to stay. So that's the way I got finally to the stage we are now, that is working primarily in communities and, for example, mega regions like Arizona, Sonora, and we deal with turning around slums and program we call city doctors, alluding to the fact that we are like a family doctor. We take care of not just the buildings or the income or when we try to make all the things work together, which is quite a thing. Anyway, that's the way I would describe the field. And my first exposure was with the specific ISPI. The anecdote is interesting, I think. A client of mine brought the ISPI brochure and said, we would like to you to go with some of the people you work with to present what you did in Banco, the Bank of Galicia in Buenos Aires. So, okay. So I started this time going to ISPI to present my clients' projects with my clients. I never went by myself to an ISPI conference. In some cases, I brought also middle managers to figure out what was there that they didn't know about how to make things happen in an organization. So that's how I got involved on the academic side. Of course, in the 70s, the first book that fell into my hands was Robert Majors, the first of the SIGPAC analyzing performance program that was really, and of course the goals. And on the other hand, I got the systemic planning of education in Spanish from a guy called named Roger Kaufman, whom I finally met 10 years later in Atlanta, Georgia, for an ISPI conference where I was presenting computer-based training project with Bank of Boston and another bank in Argentina that I brought to the conference. So that's the way I got somehow involved. But I always had a very eclectic kind of tools because I was trying to use, I would say, I think I've used even evangelical pastors to make things happen. So I didn't try, witch doctors, but if they come, welcome. So that's my spectrum. Anyway.
So that's excellent. So you, Bob Mager was one of your early influences, and Roger Kaufman. Can you share with us a little bit more about some of those early influences? Because we'd like to point people to, those either people, books, or articles. And the book, Mager book, that was my first influence was that Analyzing Performance Problems, or They Really Ought to Wanna. That's a classic. But so as a way to point others to those kinds of resources, who else was part of your early influences in this field?
Yeah, well, first of all, I must admit that I drank the whole 6 packs. So I really enjoy those books. Early influences, I would say, in addition to Roger, and of course, Gary Rambler, and my connection with Gilbert was later on down the road, because at the time, Gilbert passed a few years after I joined ISPI, and he was no longer active, and he wasn't so well known outside the United States, and I guess the ISPI circle. The other, I would say probably the other important influence is C.K. Prahalad and Peter Drucker. And I would say those are critical for my thinking in terms of looking outside in, and looking also at the connection between doing well and doing good as reciprocally related. I would say C.K. Prahalad has a 2002 article with Hammond called Serving the World's Poor Profitably. And of course, Peter Drucker has his series about 21st century management, where he was precisely explaining that results or value is created outside the company, and inside the company we only have costs. So something that my stint in Anderson helped me to figure out well. Anderson in the 80s still didn't have the problems that ended the way we all know, but it was visible that they were not caring enough for the well-being of their clients and their clients' clients. And that seemed to be a foregone question. But if your clients are doing bad things, bad products, poor services, chances are that you are going to have a bad association, and your revenue will go the same way your client goes. So that was basically the logic. And if I had to add more, I would add Greg Kersey and Gloria Giri on the computer-based training side. I have an anecdote about that. Who was my main influence for computer-based training? A movie director. The guy was a particularly kind of a very bohemian guy that was assigned to the Educational Technology Department at the United Nations in Buenos Aires, and they didn't know what to do with this guy, so they sent it to me. He was twice my age. I was in my early 30s, and he was in his 50s. And he kept driving people crazy because nobody knew what to do. He was asking their collaborators to take dictations for scripts and things like that. And finally, one day he came and put on top of my desk a nice, slim box, and it was a TI-99 A Texas Instrument home computer. And he said, "I just bought it. It's wonderful. I think we can make a movie with this." Of course, he was kind of ahead of himself, but I had no idea what to do with that. So he brought a small red TV set, black and white, hooked it up to and we started. So he only had a manual for BASIC. So I studied BASIC, and we organized the first BASIC program, which of course didn't produce a movie, but we made a simulation of a pandemic with to help the directors of the hospitals to figure out why was it important to look at the budget in primary care and in prevention. So we created a simulation with a couple of mathematicians they had there in United Nations to create crisis and a lot of things, all in BASIC. I was the programmer, and that was the way I got involved in the. Then I got a free rein in bringing 3 more home computers. By the way, my home computer was 16K at the time, and the mainframe that the institute had for carrying all the statistics was 4. So mine was free, and they paid big bucks to get the other one. So that was as fast as it went. This is 1980.
Thank you. So you've had that computer-based training beginning in instructional design, and of course, then people like Mager would have been very influential. And but so you've worked with some of the other people that are from the ISPI family, and we're both part of that ISPI family. But you mentioned before we started the video some of the other people, such as Dale Breathauer and Bob Carlton, and what can you share with us about what was their influence on you?
Well, in 2005, Roger asked me to help him in setting up the first PhD and MBA program in societal performance at the Sonora Institute of Technology in Mexico. And he wanted to make an all-star faculty. So we invited Gary Rambler, Bob Carlton, Dale Breathauer, Ingrid Guerra, and of course Roger and myself as the first group. So a lot of what I learned was basically working for doing the first 4 years of the program with all this eclectic group of people. We were together in Mexico 1 week a month during 3 years until Gary's passing. And we had meetings to design and redesign. We built the program as it is now, also working with our first doctoral students. And the peculiar characteristic of this program was that we didn't graduate people, we graduated projects and organizations. So each one of the doctoral candidates had to have a startup or a project, could be profit or non-profit. And we started with 34 projects. And we measure the impact in terms of jobs, revenue for the region, and then towards products, services, and the kind of things, ranging from, from making parts for the 787 in Guaymas to making lamps for Taos with antlers collected by the Mayo tribe in northern Sonora. So that was the spectrum of things. And in that process, of course, I learned a lot by interacting with Dale, Gary. Not only we had class and we have consulting after the class, and then we have online work on Blackboard to review the projects on a daily basis. And I was working as partner, sometimes I was a translator, and but we also had meetings overnight and under the effects of tequila to discuss all other things. And of course, I was in charge also of herding the cats, all these big people, and the Mexicans who had their own things. So I had to keep things going. I really developed a big friendship with all of them, enough to lament Gary's passing and Bob's as well. But it was a real full practical and theoretical experience. And we invented things in the way. Some of the things I used were co-designed with Gary and Dale, for example, in Tucson.
What an experience. I'm jealous. I've known
Well,
those people for a long time. I've known those people for a long, long time, and I miss their passing as well. And I got a chance to work with a couple of them directly on engagements. But yeah, there was always something to be learned from those people, and that was a great group to learn from. Let me switch gears here a little bit and ask you if, again, this is a way of showing people, giving people an example, but if you were to share with us your 30-second elevator speech on what it is that you do, if you were at a neighborhood party and there's a new neighbor and they ask you, Mariano, what do you do? What would your response be?
I would say that if I have to summarize, I try to make things work for the people who live on those things and for the larger group of the people who depends on that. That's what I basically do. There is no possibility, as I see, of making money without adding value in the long run. And in the crazy world we live in, and I grew up in a crazy world than this one, if you can believe that, you have to, sooner or later, to realize that you have to deal with those things. So that requires to bring together people who are very different, have different ideas, and you have also all kinds of social problems, even political problems. Many of the projects we develop, we have to deal with people on the left, people on the right, people on elections, people on budgets, people on government, people on private sector, and people who are very poor and live in $2 a day, and learn from them. So that's one of the interesting things. So what I do is that I'm trying to figure out how can you, for example, turn a slum into a neighborhood in 3 years, or how can we develop 40 companies and keep Mexicans in Mexico instead of sending them to the United States? Or how can we turn a gang-ridden gangs in Panama into tourist guides? Because the guys make more money with cocaine, but they want to live longer than 25. So all the methods to do this are developed on the ground with a lot of these books you see here, but a lot of care in looking around yourself, eyes on the street. Jane Jacobs, another major influence for me, not from HPT, Jane Jacobs, the famous urbanist, said that was the key thing. You have to walk the place and connect with people. So that's what I do. I usually bring together people that can help. Whenever they are, wherever they are, however they are, and I have to deal with that. That's what I do.
Thank you. Can you share with us, as a lifelong learner, what your current focus or next focus is for your own learning? So are you trying to learn something new and can share with us as a lifelong learner, where are you going? Where are you expanding your own knowledge base and experience base?
Yes. Well, I'm seriously studying what we call now nanoeconomics, which is you have macroeconomics, microeconomics, but working with poor people in these informal settlements, we discovered that there is a huge 40% of war economy is informal, off the books, what they call stealth economy, and that's what we call nanoeconomics. And that's a very interesting field to study. We work also in another field that is studying is e-performance, so turning online learning tools into tools to work. We are in one example. 20 years ago, this was kind of pie in the sky, but today is kind of obvious that the world is not going back entirely to offices or real estate. So we have to rethink universities. We have to rethink the way we configure work and process. And the third thing I'm working in is I'm writing a book on societal performance. And in my free time, I'm part of I'm writing short fiction in English. So it's a way to use all the fiction we write in consulting for a good, interesting, fun time. I think that Robert Major preceded me on that. He used to write spy novels, no?
Yes, and even Joe Harless wrote a book on fiction, which is one of my favorite fiction books. But yeah, so that's interesting. So tell us a little bit about this book on societal performance.
Well, basically the idea is from performance improvement to value creation. Is tracking the process. There is this famous Isaiah Berlin article called The Hedgehog and the Fox. Academics are hedgehogs. They have one big idea and they build a system around the idea. And consultants, we are like foxes. We are basically doing a lot of little things. So when I started thinking, okay, I'm going to do something to bring sense of this, I discovered that all these little things could come together in a bigger picture, and Roger helped me a lot with this big idea. So what I did is building the process that goes from helping people at the individual level, team level, to reach the next level organization, and then bringing the process to the societal level. And the idea is in the book is working that we are working also with John Lazar in what we call pediatrics. Management is, MBAs are usually a lot about helping big companies to move or reform or restructure or re-engineer, but there is more and more the need for understanding how startups and young companies, and like babies, they wake up at night and they do a lot of bad things, nasty things that you have to take care of. So that is, we follow like a developmental application of Erickson's theory, stages of growth from childhood to adulthood to old age, and how to work a company through the process from the kitchen table to the market. And we build with Gay also a 3 stages model for that. So that's another thing I keep coming to.
When will that book be available, do you think?
Well, I'm finishing one about Barrio 31, the experience in Argentina, that I have to deliver the manuscript by the end of this year. Next year, I think I should be able to have it by June. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So tell us a little bit more now about these books of fiction that you're writing. What are these about?
Well, these are short stories. I come from a family, my 2 uncles were fiction writers. One of them is pretty famous, Julio Cortázar, for Spanish-speaking people. Is together with Borges, probably one of the most famous. So I grew up in a family that had a lot of passion for short stories and fantastic stories. So my stories are usually fantastic. For example, a guy in Buenos Aires who's a clockmaker that finds a passage from his place in 2015 to Buenos Aires 1935. And he changes himself as well into a different person, from a clockmaker to a tango dancer. And everything happens from there. So everything, that kind of crazy stories that keeps you entertained outside the logic.
Well, very interesting. I'm looking forward to all of these books to see them. My next question is about our language in the business, in the field. You come at this from a much broader perspective than people who are involved in instruction. But what I'm looking for is there a favorite performance improvement term or phrase that you would like to share with us and define for us? And when I set this question up, I'm usually asking, saying perhaps it's a phrase that you feel is being misused or misconstrued. It doesn't have to be that, but if there's something that you would like to correct or something that you would simply like to share, your definition of a term or a phrase that's part of our field.
Well, thinking of repurposing some concepts, there is a famous dictum that what is good for General Motors is good for the country. Actually, the correct way is the other way around. And that was the way originally was said, that what is good for the country is good for General Motors. So the idea of figuring out the big picture first and then go. The other would be the first step in strategic planning is a step backward. So take distance and try to figure out the woods instead of a tree, or the woods that are this tree is part of. So before you jump into consulting, it's good to be able to do a step backward and look if you are going to jump there or elsewhere.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you. Let's go back and explore perhaps some of the people that you mentioned earlier in an earlier question here, of the people who influenced you, and let's go a little bit deeper on, what you got from them. And again, this is intended to help others understand a little bit more about these people and what value they provided to you, and perhaps we'll have a new audience for what they wrote about or taught. So, but let's start off with on a sad note, and then maybe we shift into a happier note here. But we just lost Roger Kaufman, just not even a week ago, and we've both known him for decades, and he was very influential. But so, if you were to share with us, several things that Roger taught you, what might they be?
Well, as you know, Roger was like a brother to me. He was a younger brother, more adventurous, more creative, and I was kind of his general contractor, like a crazy architect that develops great ideas, and he was in charge to figure out how to make this work. So I learned a lot of things just by the first thing that Roger did was challenge, was telling you inconvenient truth, and in the most inconvenient but humorous possible way. So one of the things I learned from Roger was the importance of establishing a humor report with whomever you are talking of big topics. A lot of people reading Roger think that mega means big. And the first thing that Roger asked when he was introducing the ideal vision, I think it's king of the world kind of vision, that take out your a picture of your loved ones you have in your pocket. Look at the picture and think about that. That is Megan. So that was his ability to convey that really the important concept is on the people, on the person you are dealing with. And he was a master in connecting. He was kind of the perfect match, a great matchmaker. We didn't know it, but later on, you and me are examples. We were brought by Roger into all kinds of partnerships and friendships and sibling rivalries as well, because he liked also to pull people into questioning. So that's one thing I think that will be hard to replace. Now I'm trying to do something that Roger told me, and is turning over part of my general contractor role to a new person. She's a woman, she's from Argentina, and she's working good enough to think of her. So my role, like Roger, should be to do matchmaking more and connecting other people. And that's the idea of creating a Kaufman Center. We discussed with him. He was also very keen in helping me personally to figure things out.
So, Prahalad, you mentioned him before, and one of the famous articles is, but tell us a little bit more about what you think he might mean to other people, what he might, the value that he might bring to other people.
Well, Prahalad was a very interesting person. I never met him personally. I worked with people who was working. I met Prahalad, let's say this way, working with the CEO of a company that asked me to put together workouts, GE work type workouts, but with the idea of competing for the future. A book by Prahalad that had these incredible, interesting ideas. What is going to be our business in 10 years from now? So for Prahalad, whatever you are doing to address the today scenario is just irrelevant. The important thing is how this plays into, are you part of a future or are you just waiting for the future to happen? And one of the things he saw early on was that the value creation happens better in need, in deep need. Therefore, bottom of pyramid innovation is the source of a lot of modern ideas, not less than the smartphone. I mean, AT&T developed these cheap phones to sell in Africa, and in Africa, I would say, what are you doing with cell phones in Africa? They don't even have electricity. Well, they can use batteries and charge the batteries with bikes, but the point is, what is the use for? Well, the use they discover is that if you carry, perishable goods in your head or your back, and you have to sell the bananas, and you go to a place, the guy who's there is going to tell you the price. But if you can call before, 2 or 3 places before going on food, you can call the price. And that's a 35% more income. So that made of Africa the first and largest market for cell phones. And this is one of many, many examples of innovation brought from BOP. So that was another thing. I'm working currently with Prahalad's daughter, Deepa, and we are going to institute the Prahalad Award for social innovation. So with Roger, we said the Kaufman Award deals with the what innovation, and the Prahalad Award is about the how. So
that's excellent. What about Peter Drucker? What are some of the takeaways that you would point people to in terms of what they can learn from the works of the late Peter Drucker?
Well, Drucker was a Renaissance man, and that I think is the thing I appreciate more about him. he said that management is a liberal art. Sorry, engineers, but by the way, mathematics is also a humanity, because whatever happens only in your mind, whether it's literature or calculus, is humanities. The other parts are, natural sciences, which are the difference. So, trained as an economist, his first in 1949 was about economics. He was always looking to the big picture and to the multidisciplinary approach, and trying to add value based on the future. There is an anecdote. He has a very nice article called the "My Life as a Knowledge Worker," something he invented, coined the term. And he said that when the Phidias, the sculptor, made the front of the temple, the Parthenon, he presented the invoice to the accountants in Athens. And the accountant said, okay, this is nice, but we are going to pay you half. Because from where you are, you can only see half of the statues. So the other part of the statues has no value. And Phidias respond to them, okay, but this is a temple. Yes. So the temple is for whom? For the gods. Yes. Well, the gods can see the whole statue. When you work, said Drucker, when you work as a consultant, remember for whom you're working. Really.
Excellent. Thank you. So you have a few more names here on the list. Let's cover them. I'm sorry if I'm going to mispronounce anything here. Gonzalo Rodriguez Villanueva. What can others learn from him?
Well, Gonzalo is a economist by training, Mexican academic, and but overall he is one of the most creative minds I ever seen. And he is always he pushed us. I remember he was the one who started the idea of graduating not just companies, but ecosystems, regions, so value chain, and then registered them as if they were students in a program. So I remember going with Roger and others, like having meetings with Gonzalo, and I was just taking notes, because it was like having a canvas of great approaches. A very enthusiastic and positive guy, and he created, as a matter of fact, he started with this program, and now is basically working on a mega region between Arizona and Sonora. When you think of the wall in between Mexico and all the politics about that, well, we delivered the Kaufman Award last year to the governors of Arizona and Sonora that actually had been working together for several years. And the economy of both states is absolutely dependent on each other. So besides of the other problems, they have to, and they work together. And that's one of the things that Gonzalo worked, always thinking, if we are going to develop this program, is to help Mexicans to stay in Mexico and export knowledge instead of just exporting people. And in that sense, both sides of the politics of the issue will agree. So, and that's what happened in Arizona. So these kind of big ideas and brilliant ideas are Gonzalo's characteristics.
Thank you. What about Ryan Watkins?
Oh, wow. Well, Ryan is introverted genius. It's like he's a low voice. It's kind of a very you have to do a little effort to get to see. Ryan is a rigorous thinker, and also a guy who looks is what Ruth Meredith Belding work about. One of the roles is the person who's in a team, the person who finds things, who can search. He has a We Share Science website, which is wonderful. You can see all the things that are in research, serious research, and he's that kind of connector, always the guy who will be careful in weighing the things. A perfect component, a perfect balance for Roger's adventurous approach.
And there's Ingrid Guerrero Lopez. What might people look to her to learn?
Let's say if you could combine the genes of Gloria Estefan with Stephen Hawking, you will get Ingrid Guerra. Okay. She's brilliant, she's energetic, and what she does especially is evaluation, her field, and impact evaluation. She's now working as a dean at Wayne State University, but she's really a dynamic. She helped us a lot in our program. She was in charge of helping people doing research, and that's in itself something very critical, because you have been there. Preparing a dissertation is discouraging at best. So what she did was creating a program to help you make it and to put that in tailored to each individual. So instead of having a director of dissertation, remote director, she really created like a coaching system that helps people to do it. So it's really good at that, and also to report with people, both languages.
Mm-hmm. Yes, she's one of my favorite people from ISBI. Tell us a little bit about Dean Spitzer and what you might expect that others can learn from him.
Well, Dean speak about energy. This is Dean is like a dynamo. I brought him to Argentina after reading his book Super Motivation. He made the most interesting model of getting basically what you could say is a Gilbert model, like a bullseye, where you see all the elements that make people do things better or worse. And she emphasized that the idea of motivation is basically, let's start with demotivators. What are the things that prevent you from doing your best? And look at those things and then target those things. Because if you can reduce the demotivators, chances are that you will be able to get the best. So people, actually, you cannot put motivation in people. We know that. But you can remove all the drag that affects people's performance. Mm-hmm. And he was doing that in very fun and interesting ways. And we had a lot of fun working in several banks and projects in Argentina back in the mid-90s. And then at night we were boating in the Delta River while he was singing Moon River with a good voice. So he's a dear friend. Now he's enjoying his tennis and his retirement in Florida, but we stay in touch. He's a very positive person, and the kind of people everybody loves to work with.
And Gloria Geary, who is known for electronic performance support systems, can you point to anything that, and I don't know if she's still actively involved in any of that, but she's left quite a legacy, I think. What would you share about her?
Well, yeah. I think she retired from technology. She's working on kids, disadvantaged kids in distant countries. And she is a very interesting, would be, if I think of Gloria, I immediately have the impression of someone who's no nonsense and thinks in practical terms. What she did with electronic performance support systems was so powerful. We call them now apps. So unfortunately, the EPSS was expensive but hard to market. Of course, apps are quite a different now, but it's basically the same idea. I remember we developed the first EPSS for banking. And this was the kind of problem that Gloria helped to solve. I mean, we have to train 200 tellers. They have to work with the computer, and they have to learn a lot of concepts, taxes, etc. And we cannot take them out to get training. So we developed a EPSS screen that was basically guiding them to ask questions to the person in front of them. And that simple tool, which is the basis of all apps, was one of her ideas. So developing a path that help you to ask questions, and then you are learning, but the person who's working with you doesn't know. And all these things, and explain in a very simple way. She was the Julia Child of instructional design.
Yes, thank you. The next person here on the list is one of my favorite people, the late Gary Rumler. So what would you share about Gary's work, and what would you point people to and what they might learn from his work?
Well, Gary was absolutely a delight to work with. I was lucky to get the opportunity to work with him again in these years I mentioned, right before, two or 3 years before his passing. And I had to convince him to travel thankfully, from Tucson to Obregon, where we were working, wasn't that far. And I remember he saying to me, looking at what we were doing, and I think we were in a hotel in Obregon, and said, we are like the Electras here. You know, the Electras, the boneyard. Well, yeah, but the Electras are flying now. So what he injected was a lot of, first, he was amazing with the ability to picture things, to draw things. So if I may say, let me show you one thing I learned from Gay.
Yes.
This is the consequence. I cannot work without drawing. And he was drawing all the way and helping us to work, and that whiteboard that you draw. Mm-hmm. Very powerful to collaborate, because the other thing he didn't really like to teach. He liked to discuss ideas. He was really, in the best sense of the way, he was the Uber engineer, a guy who helps other people to think through complex problems. And I think it was amazing to work with him and Dale. They were also a team. Like Dale and Gary were like Roger and myself. So they were very complementary one of each other. And people really enjoyed them tremendously.
Yeah, Bauer's one of my favorite people as well. My only critique of your drawing is that I didn't see any little stick people on there, which was Gary's trademark almost. This people.
I'm not that good at it.
All right, the last person then is the late Bob Mager. We just lost Bob Mager a few months ago, and he was very important. So you've mentioned the six pack. You mentioned that first book, Analyzing Performance Problems. What could you say about Bob Mager, Robert F. Mager, for our audience?
if Gloria Giri was the Julia Child of instructional design, I think that Bob Mayer was the Mark Twain. He had this ability to put in a simple language powerful concepts. The algorithm to analyze the problem is so good. The question like, is there any punishment for doing the right thing? Or is there any reward for doing the things wrong? And that's a powerful, simple question that people immediately gets excited about. Okay, we can solve a lot of problems by just asking that. The other thing I think he was really good at explaining the difference between criterion and norm reference. We live in the era of the norm reference things. So we are the best of the mediocre, the less bad of the, and we continue to do these things. I mean, in the percentile, 95 of the chapter 11 heap. So that kind of thing that he explains so simply, like, okay, and then writing objectives based on behavior. So it's not what you say, but what you do, and just show me. And for those in education, that cut a lot of BS. Let's put it that way.
Yes.
But he also humor was an incredible, powerful tool. That's why I mentioned the Mark Twain thing.
Mm-hmm.
The American slang, you can see the title, no? And also the idea of I can make a joke about that. So you will remember that I think was great.
Well, thank you for sharing all of that about those fabulous people.
Yeah.
Mariano, thank you so much for agreeing to participate with me in this video interview. My final question to you is that, do you have any parting words of wisdom for people who are new to the field, just coming on board? What would you recommend to them? What would your guidance be for them?
Well, besides the step backward, the other thing would be don't be afraid of wandering outside your box. If something good that among all the good things that Roger wrote, reality is not divided in disciplines. So this morning I was talking with a friend who's an engineer about, but an engineer doing other things. We are working in this barrio, in the slum, and trying to figure out how to help people there. And one thing that is clear is that the first engineers were a lot of other things. Think of Leonardo. So a Leonardesque approach is important. Try to look around, look at other things that can help. Maybe something about history is helpful, something about art, something about theater, something about, so, and then don't be afraid about using mathematics and formulas and logic and algorithms. So you can also use all those things. You can do a better job by learning more things than the things we were trained for.
Yes. Again, Mariano, thank you so much for doing this with me today. You have a great day.
Likewise, likewise.